Word. Okay, so my name is Aviana, and here today I'm going to be coaching Alexis on her probability lesson that she taught. Before we get started, just a recap of what I noticed is that Alexis was teaching a probability review, focusing on the probability continuum, which is the number line showing that probability ranges from 0 to 1. In that video, Alexis explains to her students that you could use this number line. First, she used words, and then she used the decimal version of those words, and then converted those words to percents, and then converted it to fractions, and then also showed those fractions on a picture using circles. After she did the introduction, the example that was shown was marbles, and there were some marbles that were in a bag, and some of the questions that were asked to the class was named an impossible event, and also name a certain event, and she represented all of this on the whiteboard as her students were answering her questions. So first, Alexis, how do you think this lesson went?
So for it to be a review lesson 2 days before milestones, it was the second heavy standard. So I wanted to make sure they were comfortable with stats. And this is my lower level class, which most of them are on second and third grade LETSALs and just score low overall in throughout all my 4 periods. So I feel like they did good on the review, even though there was a group off to the side chit-chatting, which you could hear in the video too, the girls. But for most part, the boys were focused and my quiet students were even participating, which it was good to see them coming out of their shell a little bit because they already learned probability. And so now they're just reviewing it. So I feel like they felt a little bit more comfortable with it the second time around than when I first introduced it a month ago.
Right. And I definitely could notice that in the video. I also did a probability review for my lesson,
Yes.
and I did tree diagrams because it is something that the students, it's new to them this year.
Mhm.
So, and I know when I taught it the first time, they really struggled with it. And I also taught it to my co-taught, which somehow every year seems to just naturally be a lower level class.
Yes.
But the way you taught it is the exact same way that I taught it. So I immediately understood what you were doing, and it was presented very well to the class.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in that class, I also noticed that once they did their independent work, they were in groups. Is there a certain way that you group your students, or is it kind of just how wherever they sit that day?
So sometimes I let them choose their groups, and other times I'll generate groups on the board, or they'll pull out cards and they have to match with the person next to them. If they pull a three of hearts, then a three of diamonds, or so on. So that day, I just let them sit, like group together who they were sitting by, because it was only 30-minute classes because they just finished ELA milestones day one. So
Oh,
I just
okay.
let them group how they were already sitting and just have them circle around each other.
Okay, perfect. And so for the students that you teach, what are the main demographics?
So a majority of the students are African American with like a few Hispanics that are ESOL students.
Okay, so your demographics are very, very similar to mine.
Yes.
Do you notice any disadvantages for them when it comes to mathematics, being that it is a large minority population?
So with my students, most of their parents didn't finish high school, or they did graduate high school and then just didn't go to college. So they don't really have that support at home that can help them with math. The parents try and they'll reach out to me, which I appreciate, trying to help their kids with math, but the kids just have, I don't want to say like the lack of common sense for it, but they just can't compute. Like it's hard for them to do word problems for math, multiplication, division. So with them not having the basic, it's kind of hard to get them to do the seventh grade topics.
I definitely agree. It seems to be like a trend. Not, I don't even
Yes.
want to say trend, that's not a good word, but just I guess more common than what it
Hmm.
used to be. They just some of them just don't have that drive to want
Exactly.
to, want to be successful, and I can say it in so many different ways, and
Mhm.
it doesn't click, sadly.
It doesn't, but when they do have those small, tiny moments that click, it's like light bulbs go off for them, and it's just exciting to see them light up when they finally
Yes,
understand something.
it really is. Like, even though they don't get it, like you said, they get
Mhm.
really excited when they do. And I just, maybe they just don't understand the importance of, doing well,
Yeah.
or the consequences of not doing well.
Mhm.
Because they're just kind of like, well, I'm here, so
Yeah.
it should be enough.
Yeah, and our district doesn't really help us with it because if they fail 2 classes, they still move on, but you have to fail 3 or more to even be thought about retention, which is kinda sad. They're like, "Well, all I gotta do is pass 2 classes and I'm good." And I just
Hmm.
hate them having that mindset.
Yeah, I know. I had a student last year who I taught eighth grade last year, and he even told me, he was like, I can fail one class and go to high school, and so it'll probably just be yours because I don't really understand it. And
Yeah.
he actually ended up making a B, but that was his
Yeah.
mindset at the beginning of the year, that this is going to be my one class that I fail, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that that's one of your lower classes. So is that like a co-taught class, or is it just naturally low?
This is just naturally low. This is one of my regular classes, so I have 3 periods of math, 7th grade math, and 1 advanced period that does 8th grade math. But this is just my class that's just very low. There's maybe about 3 students out of the 24 kids in there that are high, Lexel high and everything, but generally that's a low class. Most of them ranges from 2nd to 3rd, no more than 5th grade reading level.
Hmm.
And so
So
it's
with
hard when all of them are low in that class.
Right, no, I get it. So with it being a class that does naturally struggle, do you find yourself having to differentiate more than, with your other classes?
Yes, so with this class, it's kind of hard to group them since most of them are low and trying to
Hmm.
take the low, middle, and high and break them up. So I really have 1 high group and then 2 low groups that I go back and forth with when I differentiate them up just to chunk the lesson down more. And I do see myself spending more time repeating stuff with this particular class than other classes and having to give them extra videos and support and just trying to get them to understand in a way they can understand it than how the book is doing it or I'm teaching it. Trying to, in a way, talk how they talk to each other, like
Yeah.
slanging it and everything. Like, how can I get y'all to understand in
Hmm.
y'all's language?
Right. I find myself doing the same thing. Trying to, I guess, relate to them in
Hmm.
a way that they understand. Because I struggle also with just doing group work in general. Like,
Yes.
I find myself like, they just don't do it if it's in a group, or one person does it and then they just like last 10 minutes want to copy that one
Yes.
student. And so I know for the longest time, like when I was getting observed, my admin would say incorporate more group work, and I'm just like, I feel like it's more of a disservice,
Yeah.
um just to my demographic of students,
Mhm.
rather than if they just do it, independently, especially now with technology,
Yes.
all those AI websites and stuff
I
like
hear it
that. I
all the
find,
time.
yes, just find it more and more that they don't, there's so many websites and apps that do it for them,
Mhm.
that, they don't do it themselves unless it's like a paper and pencil, make sure we collect the phones.
Yes. And
So,
I'm trying
go
to
ahead.
find different ways to get them to do it. Because before I even been like, okay, so each person's gonna pick a different problem in the group, and then y'all are gonna talk about it, and they're like, and
Mhm.
then they get stuck because they're not working on the same problem. I'm like,
Right, so it's
trying to
not
find
even really a
something.
collaboration anymore. It's
No,
more like a think, pair, share type thing.
yes, just something to get them to do their own work without copying, like you said.
Right. So, you noticed I mentioned that, no, you mentioned that this was a review. So what was the lesson, that your original lesson, was it very similar to this review lesson?
Yes, so the original lesson when I first introduced it was teaching them the probability line and how it goes from 0 to 1. And then I was using examples like for impossible, you're not going to see a polar bear under your desk
Hmm.
randomly. And then certain, you'll see them in the wintertime, like Alaska or somewhere. And then I had different examples when we first did it a month ago. And I had the students say, okay, is this impossible, unlikely, matching it up? So some of them were like, you'll have two birthdays in this year, or I'll see George Washington when I walk home from school. Just something that they could understand in a way, just getting them to match up impossible, certain, unlikely at the beginning.
Right. And do you find that if you ask them to represent the number line like in different numbers, do they struggle with the conversion between like fraction, decimal, and percent?
So normally with like the fractions they don't know, like 2/8 or something, then yes. But I taught them to this in a way of a quarter, thinking of
Yes.
how many quarters make a dollar. So that really connected with them. So they can do halves and fourths, but when we get away from those, that's when they struggle with decimal and
Hmm.
fraction conversions.
And I saw you mentioned that in your lesson. You said, I think you said think of 3/4 or think of 4/4.
Yes.
So I definitely I definitely can tell that you do use that in your lesson because I know mine, they just don't like fractions at all. So it's
They don't.
almost to the point where I'm before they even do fractions, they're converting it to a decimal.
Mhm.
Just so that they don't have to work with them. I don't
Yes.
know if that's a hindrance or, or what, but they're all the same and they all can be converted between the two. So if you don't like one, I always say, well, there's other options that you can,
Yeah,
choose
and they're
from.
so used to the calculators, it's like teaching them
Right.
long division and do it by hand, they're like,
Hmm.
um,
And you can't do fractions in the calculator. So that's
yes.
why I say if you want to use the calculator, you're going to have to convert it to a decimal, but you have
Mhm.
to know how to convert it to a decimal.
Yes.
So, I mean, I guess in a way they're constantly, going through those conversions, but I definitely tell that if I say 2/8, they're gonna be like, I don't know what that is at all.
Yeah, so I'm like, y'all have to know fractions in 7th grade, you see it everywhere, unit rates, constant proportionality.
Hmm.
This is your this gonna be
It's
first
in
we're going into
every
high school.
It's in every unit because even in
Mhm.
geometry, you still have to do the like area of a triangle. It's still
Yes.
1/2 base times height. So
Mhm.
you still use those fractions in every single unit.
Yes.
And so lastly, was the worksheets that you did, is that like a part of your curriculum or something that you just found?
So that worksheet came from our iReady book, and we've been using those to prepare for milestones. And so it chunks down each section into a mini lesson. So
Hmm.
normally we use the HMH into Georgia math books, but when we start reviewing for milestones, we'll pull those iReady books that give them like examples on one page, and then it lets them work through a couple of problems to get them comfortable with it.
Perfect. And so on a regular basis, you said the HMH learning.
Yes, the HMH learning, or we'll use the Georgia frameworks tests.
Oh, those are so hard to me.
They changed them up. I used to love them last year, but now it's
Mhm.
like I see why you're making them challenging, but not for
Some
the
of them are
students.
just too hard to me
Yes.
for me. So I know I tend to use just our curriculum too. I've
Mhm.
tried to incorporate. Sometimes I can incorporate like 1 or 2 pages of the, stuff
Yes.
that the state provides, but like the whole packet,
Uh-uh.
sometimes I'm
I
like,
cannot
no.
get hope getting my kids either. They're gonna be like,
Right, right, right. Okay. Oh, and one last thing. If there was anything that you think that you could, do differently next time, is there anything?
I think I would strategically put them in seats so the girls don't chit chat as
Mhm.
much because they were just done testing for the day and wanted to talk. But I would pair them up, try to pair them up by high and low level, like based off unit test or something in the past they did to see who tested high and who tested low and partner them up with
Mhm.
their different levels to see if that would help them.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, that was all the questions I had. I really enjoyed watching your lesson because it's kind of cool to see. We don't get to observe other teachers in my building, so
Mhm.
it's kind of see
Yeah.
cool to see other teachers and then realize like the teaching styles are, similar.
Mhm.
So kind of makes me feel like I'm doing something right too. It's like if
Yes.
she's doing it the same way, then this is probably the correct way. So anyways, I hope you enjoy the rest of your school year. It's almost done.
You too. Thank you so much for your feedback.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.